and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, the program where we bring you the people behind the news. I'm Maokbe Ogun Yusuf. Well, President Olusegun Obasanjo may have written a letter that caused quite a stir last week, but he's not the only one versed in the art of writing letters. My guest tonight is young, at least younger than I am, but don't let his age deceive you. He's no juvie. He's written his own fair share of letters as well. Jideonwo is a lawyer, serial entrepreneur, and journalist. He can claim credit for managing brands that have helped put new governments in office in Nigeria and Ghana. He's an author too, and he's just completed a World Fellowship at the prestigious Yale University. Jideonwo, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with that letter.
Right. Which of them?
President Obasanjo's letter, not your own letter. What did you make of it? Were you surprised when you saw it?
No, well, I was surprised but not shocked. I was surprised because I had begun to wonder what the hold President Buhari had on his colleagues. He has almost fallen to the level of popularity of the former president, Jonathan. And yet his colleagues still speak of him with respect and awe. And I began to wonder what it was that I wasn't noticing. Was it the military esprit, the core? Was it, a sense of magnetism that he has personally? So, because I thought that it was about time for people to start speaking against him. And so, when President Obasanjo's letter came out, I thought, okay, that makes sense.
But by him, you mean President Buhari?
Yes, I thought people were in awe. Something about him was stopping people from doing what I thought was their natural thing to do.
That's President Buhari?
Yes. And so I thought he had cast a spell on these people. And so when President Obasanjo spoke up, I thought, okay, so no, he hasn't cast a spell on these people. They are still acting in the way that I expect of them, because this is what I expect of President Obasanjo.
What would you consider the worst criticism in President Obasanjo's letter?
I think it's the accusation of there's a lot. I think it's just the tone. I think it's the tone of disappointment that strikes more than anything. With President President Obasanjo obviously had no respect or regard for him. He held him in disdain. But I think disdain is much better than this disappointment. It's almost like we expected more from you, and we've held ourselves so far, and you are by far the biggest disappointment because of the trust that we had in you. I think it was that sense of talking to a recalcitrant child that I thought, if these people are perceptive enough, that's what should worry them the most.
Recalcitrant child?
Yes.
Even though you said the letter was respectful?
It was it was, when I say no, it wasn't directly disdainful. If you remember the letter to Jonathan, he called him basically unhinged. He called him illiterate. He called him incapable of thought. Those are not the things he did here. What he did here was more respectful in language, but the underlying tone, yes, was like dealing with a recalcitrant child. It was like dealing with a child that you gave so much hope, so much of a rope. You had so much faith in. You allowed the child to do more than any other person, and then the child fails you. And so you almost feel like you have no choice but to flog this child.
There's a tone that you have also expressed in your own letter. You wrote a letter to President Buhari on the second anniversary of his coming to office. Is that right?
Yes.
And you were also quite disappointed.
Yes.
You titled the letter, "You've Broken Our Hearts."
Yes.
Did you get a response to that letter first?
No, of course not. First of all, I think he was...
Oh, you weren't expecting a response?
I wasn't expecting it. Who am I? I wasn't expecting a response. Not from him at any rate. And then, of course, he was out of the country dealing with his ill health, or around that time. So, no, I wasn't expecting a response. But I got the reactions that I envisaged and wanted. I wanted to make it clear that, as far as I was concerned, there was no longer any moral case to be made in supporting him. And I wanted to ensure that I kickstarted that conversation amongst young people. And, even in my small way, to make it clear that it was all right for other people to begin to speak up if they thought that the trust that was reposed on the president hadn't been justified.
Was that your disclaimer?
Maybe, so to speak, because I feel like if you are prominent in making a thing to happen, there's a sense of personal responsibility you have towards it. It's not just enough to disapprove quietly. You almost have a duty, a personal duty, to respond to it with the same clarity as you spoke up for it. And so for me, I wanted there to be no doubt in anybody's mind where I now stood on this president. Even though I'd had those opinions I'd expressed them, I'd begun to notice that this wasn't going to go well as far as I was concerned from, I think, September 2015. And at a speech at the Ibadan School of Government and Public Policy, I had made it clear that if this government continued on the path that it had begun on the economy, we're going to have I didn't call it a recession, but we're going to have a slowdown. And I was severely disappointed in the lateness of the appointment of ministers and the fact that the wait didn't produce anything worth waiting for. And so from that time, I began to hint and hint and hint. But then I still thought that 1 year is not enough to judge a presidency. 2 years is not enough to judge a presidency. Well, 1 year, 1.5 years, but 2 years, 50% gone. That's enough time to make it clear where you stand on the presidency.